Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to another Burlingame. It's a small town podcast sponsored by the Burlingame Historical Society. My name is Mark Lucchese, also known as Mark at the Mic, and my guests today are two of the founders of the Burlingame Voice, Joe Baylock and Russ Cohen. Hey guys, thanks for joining me today on Burlingame. It's a small town.
It's a pleasure to be here, Mark, and kind of an honor, actually, given the esteemed podcaster that you are.
Boy, that's the voice of Joe Baylock. Let's hear Russ Cohen.
And I just want to thank you for this fabulous spread that you've put out here. Wait, that was another meeting I was going to.
You guys, I knew this was going to go like this. All right, let's just jump right in, boys, okay? Joe Baylock, I'll start with you. What is The Voice?
Mark, The Voice is a 20-plus year effort by Russ and I, and originally a bunch of other people, to educate and inform the community of Burlingame. It spans all sorts of topics, and I think we're going to get into some of the history of when it was actually a paper-based, hard copy delivered piece of material. But right now, it's an online blog.
Great. A blog.
A blog.
All right.
Blog is a website that you can go to. It doesn't require any sign-in. It has no advertising, no subscription. You just go and you read original posts that are put up by myself and by Russ, and then you can read all the commentary that goes associated with it from anybody anywhere in the world who wants to comment.
Okay. My question to you, Russell, is how and when did The Voice originate?
Well, it's funny you should ask that, Mark, because as I look back on the documentation of the original printed version, one of the things we neglected to do, and maybe we did it on purpose, but I think we just actually forgot to do it, was to date those early issues. So if you look at some of the early issues, here's issue number 1, volume 1, number 1, and what we can do to establish the date is to just look at the coverage, the stories that we're covering, and we can kind of figure it out from there. My guess is it was probably around 1999, 98, maybe something like that, because we did start dating them right around 2000. So those first couple of years, we just didn't think of to put a date on it.
So that's like 21, 22 years of business going to publishing.
Right. Well, this summer will be the 20th anniversary of it going online.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. Late July, and we always do an anniversary post.
Great.
Which will be a lot of fun for the 20th. We might have to do something even more fun, Russ, for 20
absolutely.
years.
We'll have to put our thinking caps on for that.
Yeah.
So I know that you two are founders. Who are the other founders?
Well, let me try to tackle that question because it's a little complex, and I'll take you way back to the very, very beginnings of how the Burlingame Voice came to be in the first place. There was a newspaper here in town. I think at the time it was the Boutique and Villager. It later became the Independent. Mm-hmm. And they would cover local issues, and some of us in the community felt that they weren't covering the kinds of issues and topics that we thought were pertinent. One time they were covering something, and I'd be honest with you, I don't remember what the issue was, but I didn't agree with it. So I wrote a letter to the editor, and at on the back end of that letter, I ended it by saying something like, boy, if I could start my own newspaper, I would. And that was not an idle threat because I had been, for a moment there, a journalism major in college and the editor of the college magazine, and so on and so forth. So I had the knowledge to do it, but I didn't have the wherewithal, the inclination to do it. And the other thing that I didn't realize at the time was that the person who was the editorial manager of this paper also happened to be the publisher of the paper. I didn't know that at the time. And there's an old saying, something like, don't mess with a guy who's got an unlimited amount of ink and paper.
Mm-hmm. Ink by the barrel.
Ink by the barrel. And so it was a bit of an idle threat. It was a bit of venting. A few months later, there was a meeting in someone's home about another issue. And it was a heated debate. Can I mention names?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, why not?
So a guy named Ken Castle, he used to live on the west side. He was very community-oriented, and so was a small group of other people. And we all went to his house in his living room, and we were meeting about whatever the issue was. And Ruth Jacobs, she was the first woman planning commissioner here in Burlingame and served for about 20 some odd years on the commission. And she was talking and she said, hey, did anybody see that letter in the paper a few weeks ago where the guy said he wanted to start his own newspaper? We should do that. So that meeting ended, and some of us after the meeting started talking, and it was like, you know what? That's not a bad idea. So the next meeting was at my house, and there was a group of people who were interested in actually making something like this happen. And it was Ken Castle, it was myself, it was Jess Rote, it was Darlene DeMaria, it was John Webb, it was Jerry Deal, maybe a couple of others. And we listed them after volume 1, number 1, where we did not list who the editors were, because at the time we thought, well, nobody needs to know that. But then we realized, yeah, the public has a right to know who's behind this. So I think even by volume 2, we started putting the way we described it in volume 1 was the editorial board is made up of a group of concerned citizens of Burlingame. Well, people were a little leery of that, like, well, who is that? You know. So, and we said the editorial board is made up of a group of concerned citizens. They include, in no particular order, Jess Rote, John Webb, Russ Cohen, Ken Castle, Kathy Baylock, Joe Baylock, Darlene DeMaria, and so forth. So that's how it got started. We had a meeting. We wanted to publish a newspaper. It was going to be self-funded. We were not going to have any advertising because we didn't want anybody influencing the editorial content. In the beginning, Joe, if you remember, we were trying to be objective, right? We were trying to present the issues that we thought were important in an objective fashion. What we later decided, and you can jump in any time, is why would we do that? This is our little rag, so why aren't we editorializing? Why aren't we sharing our opinion about this issue or that issue? Why do we have to be objective?
When did that come along? How many issues in did you decide to change that?
I would say maybe 2 or 3.
Yeah?
It wasn't long. It wasn't long at all. Because we just thought, you know, some of the mainstream newspapers are not being objective. The publisher, Jerry Fuchs, he would take innuendo and hearsay, and he'd write a whole column about it, and the facts didn't matter to him. And that was very infuriating to us. And so we thought, why are we trying to be objective? We're not a newspaper. We don't have to be objective. And I think that perspective still exists today. Would I be?
I think that's accurate, sure. It was certainly a reaction to the local press, both the things that it missed and the way that it presented what it did present.
So in essence, was that the goal of the Voice then, to be a sort of a subjective type of print paper?
Well, yes and no. I think the motto of informing people was really our goal, because we felt that the local press was not really informing the people of the issues that they needed to know about.
Okay.
The things that we covered, they were not covering.
Okay.
And we have a long history in the community. Both Russ and I, my wife and I, have been here for almost 33 years. You'll recall that she did 12 years on the Burlingame City Council. Russ did 2 years on the Burlingame City Council. So we have a great understanding of how the city operates, almost from the inside. And like Russ, I have some background in publishing. I spent 30 years with an IT industry analysis firm, 15 of which I wrote on deadline professionally, and another 15 that I spent hiring people to write on deadline and teaching them critical thinking skills and teaching them how to be numerate, how to look at data and do more than just report on it. So we've got the skill set to be able to do things that frankly a lot of the journalists around here have to struggle with to do it right, and they don't really have the time. They're on a daily or deadline. You know,
it's also expensive. You know, a mainstream newspaper has to pay their staff. We're doing this of our own accord, so we don't have that constraint either.
Yeah,
So-
our total expenses, Mark, are $15 a month to host the site.
For the site, correct? Yeah.
It's nothing.
Okay,
and in the beginning, you know, we would distribute this. We would print it ourselves. We would fund it ourselves. We would distribute it door to door. throughout Burlingame ourselves. Joe and I would be walking every neighborhood, door to door, delivering them.
Wow,
and
you
we'd
must
leave
have
'em-
printed up a lot of papers then.
We did. I don't know that we reached every single
No,
household.
we,
Yeah.
we used to do 500 or 750.
something like that.
And we'd leave them in Il Piccolo. We'd leave them here in the library in Burlingame.
Yeah. You left them at that little grocery store down
Left
the
them
street
at the
on
little
Chapin.
grocery store that's, still going well, even though the management's changed a little bit. So it was a lot of work. It's good exercise,
Yeah.
but it's a lot of work.
So when you got it rolling and everything, how many of the founders of those 8 or so people, it sounded like about 7 or 8 people you mentioned, were active contributors? Did everybody write something, or did they would just supply you guys with some facts and then you guys would write the articles? How'd that work?
I think it was kind of all over the map. There, I know Ken Castle wrote a few articles. Jerry Deal actually wrote one article. Joanne Garrison was a contributor one time when we actually did a survey. Mark, you'd be interested in this. We did a survey of supermarkets in Burlingame.
I'm not
to
interested.
see-
I know all about it, okay? Don't worry, I heard enough flack about that.
We also had a couple of pieces written by people who weren't part of the founding team.
Right, like Joanne Garrison's a good example of that.
Yeah, and the gentleman who did the survey of the trees, the original eucalyptus, he knew a bit about resistograph.
Yeah, I don't
I think
remember.
it's Mike Rietzma.
Oh, Mike Rietzma. That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
That's
So-
right. That's right.
So we weren't protective of the content any more than you have to be when it's only 4 pages long.
Yeah. Okay, so would you consider the Voice leaning right, center, or left?
It depends on what part of the history of Burlingame Voice you choose. Because I think it leans one way today, more so than it leaned perhaps in the beginning.
So
of its
which way are we
history.
leaning today?
I think it's leaning right at the moment.
So you've gone, it's swung both ways, then you're saying, over the course of the years?
I think so. and
Depending on what
that-
the political mood was?
I don't think
No,
it
I
never
don't-
leaned left.
I don't think it leaned left necessarily, but I think when it became a blog, that's when it started to lean right, and I can tell you why. It's because somebody has to lead the blog effort. As much as we both contribute, or sometimes others contribute, quite frankly, Joe is leading the effort and has for the last several years. Due to a lot of different circumstances, I was working full time and volunteering on other issues, and just things get in the way.
He's
So,
leading the pack because he's writing most of the articles?
That's correct. That's
Yeah.
correct.
Okay. So when you guys decided to move from print to online, did you lose circulation, or did you lose subscribers or customers?
Well, we don't have subscribers or customers. We just had doorsteps that we dropped it on.
So how did you ever measure how you were doing?
Well, when it was a print version, the only way we could measure was, are they gone from where we left them? That's about the science of it.
Well, we would occasionally get comments of, how do I subscribe to this? I want to get it more often. But it was, you could ask the same question of any newspaper, right?
Yeah.
I get 2 newspapers in my driveway. The publisher has no idea whether I read them or not.
Right.
So now once it's online, we've got statistics on the back end that can show the traffic to the website and where it comes from.
Okay.
And it's focused on Burlingame, and it's expanded a little bit to more some of the county issues. But we get 300 or 400 hits a day. When a new original post goes up, which is about once or twice a week, that'll bump up because people have what's known as an RSS feed, so they
Yes.
know a new post came out, and
Yeah.
they'll come and visit. So it jumps to 500, sometimes 600 hits that day.
Right. So you're publishing 2 to 3 times a week?
Yeah.
Okay. Who decides what's to publish? What are you going to write about? How do you decide, hey, I'm going to write about this? Give me an idea.
We do.
We do. I think it's a little different today than it was back in the early days. Back in the early days, we'd look around and go, what's going on in town that we think people need to know about? That part hasn't changed. But deciding on what those issues are, right now it's largely up to Joe.
Yeah.
Because he's driving the effort.
So you don't
So let me answer it this way.
Yeah.
If you go to burlingamevoice.com, our URL, on the right-hand side, what's known as the right-hand frame, you'll see categories. And those categories, I'll just read the first 5 or 10. They're in alphabetical order. It's Bayfront development, it's books, it's Broadway, it's Burlingame's Best, it's City Council, always popular, City Finances, which I enjoy digging into in what's known as the CAFR report and other things, Climate, which has gotten hot lately with all the shenanigans around natural gas banning and everything else, community events, county issues, crime. I follow crime pretty closely, and you'll see some posts there. And then it goes on. We talk about restaurants. We talk about local businesses.
Yeah, and you have great archives, I guess you would call it, because you can go way back.
It's a complete archive.
I went way back and found stuff that I thought was pretty interesting.
And the beauty of the online format is when we do a post, a lot of times it's not the first time we've touched this subject. So you can insert backlinks. When you see a word there that's underlined and in blue, you click on that, and it'll take you back 2 years, 4 years, 6 years on The Voice for the perspective that we presented back then.
That's pretty cool.
And it's powerful.
I think there are certain subjects that come up over and over and over again, and land use is one of them. Right? If you look at the printed version, you look at the online version, we're constantly writing about land use. You know, what 10-story building is proposed now? How many? In the beginning, an interesting thing we started doing was we started to try to keep track of how many single-family homes were being demoed. So if you look at this, for instance, in the corner, it says 21 homes have been demolished since January.
To be rebuilt.
To be rebuilt.
Into big homes,
so
right?
Then a couple of issues later,
McMansions, monster homes.
You see 35 homes have been demolished. So we were trying to keep track of those, but it was very difficult to do that because the city didn't keep track of those. I would have to go down to City Hall, look at the building plans, and if I saw something that indicated it was a single-family home that was being remodeled, quote unquote, I'd have to make a judgment based on the plan whether that was a remodel or it was a demo.
Yep.
So that's
and to Russ's point, this topic lives on now. We've got Senate Bill 9. A lot of people in town are worried that the house next door to them is going to get...
Can you explain that?
I'm about to do that.
Well, thank you.
The house next door to them can get bought and get torn down and can turn into multifamily housing, even though it's a single-family residential zoned neighborhood.
And what's that called again?
Senate Bill 9, SB 9.
Is that I'm sorry, I'm a little ignorant on this. Is that a county type of thing, or is that Burlingame?
Statewide.
Statewide.
California Senate Bill 9.
Okay.
Right.
Interesting.
It failed the first time it came through, but what it really does is it takes away local control from any locality, any municipality, where currently municipality has lots of guidance. They have design review, zoning, all kinds of things to make sure that our neighborhoods stay the way they're supposed to stay. With this bill, for example, that all goes out the window, and you can have a fourplex next to a single-family home.
That's amazing. Boy.
And think of the problems that come along with that, Mark. It's not just the building or even the raw number of people there. It's the parking. It's the water consumption. It's the load on the local school system. It's police and fire responsiveness. Part of the principles of the Burlingame Voice are we have to respect the law of unintended consequences. Whenever you do something, there are the things you expect to happen, and then there are the consequences that you didn't think about.
Mm-hmm. And this is just exactly what the Voice is all about, that a local newspaper doesn't have the time or the space to devote to these kinds of nuances, right? We can write a blog that's, it'll take you 20 minutes to read if we wanted to, because we want to explore all those nuances. So that's the benefit of sort of the Burlingame Voice approach as opposed to your regular local newspaper. And I'm not bashing the local newspaper, not at all. They provide a very valuable asset to the community, but we can take our time and we can dig and we can point out all of these unintended consequences. And that's what we choose to do.
And it's community driven in the sense that anybody can place a comment against that original post.
I thought
there are posts there that have 50, 60, 70 comments against them.
Wow.
And as an editorial board, we decided long ago that we would very rarely edit any comment. It would have to break our rules of engagement, pretty definitely for us to remove it or edit it. So we're pretty hands off in that respect.
Great.
We're also not requiring people's real names. You can put a comment up there under any name you want. We do require an email address, but the name can remain, whatever you want it to be.
Right.
There's actually a post on The Voice about this, because every once in a while I'll get pushback about that, and I wrote a post after reading Ben Franklin's biography about how Poor Richard's Almanac was run the exact same way, and he thought it added a lot of value to the community.
So I read your most recent article. I believe it was about the Caltrans, right, tearing out the eucalyptus trees and how they slanted it. Well, they didn't slant it. They just, the way they worded it, and you sort of explained what the wording really meant. Tell us about the trees.
There's two interesting aspects about that post. The first is Russ and I and a number of other very engaged locals actually go to these meetings, right? We show up, we listen to Caltrans, we listen to the city officials, we view the materials that they had there, and I take copious notes, right?
And we ask tough questions.
And we ask them tough questions that they then have to answer. To your point, the way there's about 390 of the big historic eucalyptus trees on the 3-mile stretch in Burlingame, and it drops a little bit into North San Mateo. And when asked the direct question, how many of those are going to be cut down in this renewal project of this historic highway, the woman said there will be 9% remaining. And so when I go to write it up,
do the math on that one.
When I go to write it up, I don't put 9% in the headline. I put 91% are going to be gone. And the headline reads, it's still at the top there today, 91% of 390 trees is a lot of trees.
It's a lot of trees.
That's a lot of trees. So,
is the project starting at one end or the other? Do you even know where it's going to begin? And where is the boundaries of that?
Well, the boundaries are basically from Millbrae when you enter Burlingame all the way to North San Mateo.
Santa Ynez, yeah.
Right. So I don't know that they have a phased plan of when they're going to.
But it's hoping for next year, 24?
24.
Summer of 24.
Summer of 24 is when they're going to start removing the trees. And when one of the Caltrans representatives said that in the meeting, I happened to be standing next to our mayor, and I nudged him and I said, that's when you want to leave town, because people are going to start calling you when those trees start getting removed on a large scale.
A lot of people still don't even know this thing is going to happen, huh?
Well, you know what? That's typical of a lot of issues in Burlingame throughout our history, and that's why we started the Burlingame Voice. That's exactly why we started it, because a lot of people didn't know what the important issues were because the newspapers simply weren't covering it.
Okay, so that brings me to a column that you guys used to have in the print section. And I couldn't find it online, so if I'm wrong, let me know. But it was called "What's Up with That?" Did you write that, Russell? Was that yours?
We took turns, actually.
Yeah, I thought that was great. So why did that disappear?
It didn't disappear. It's just not called that anymore. Pretty much every post is "What's Up with That?"
I was going to say that. It really is. The Burlingame Voice could be called "What's Up with That?" Because that's really all we do is say, what is going on here?
Yeah.
Here's a fun one from earlier this week. From February 6th of this year, Burlingame Dining, some of the 100 best, ?
Yep.
And you saw the Yelp review where two really small
Gigi's
and Cafe
yes.
Huyaga, I apologize for the pronunciation.
Where is that?
It's on Broadway.
Okay.
North side of Broadway.
Yeah.
Got listed in Yelp's nationwide 100 best restaurants. That's really amazing.
That is. It really is. Yeah.
Really amazing. So we could say, what's up with Yelp, or we could say, "What's up with Gigi's Cafe?"
Yeah, but you had a specific column, and I thought that was, it was like a 3-dot
We
type
asked
of thing.
pointed questions.
Yeah.
It was a 3-dot thing. A lot of
right.
my inspiration comes from Herb Cain, the
Yeah.
old-time
Yeah.
columnist from
Yeah.
the San Francisco Chronicle.
Chronicle,
These
correct.
are a little bit more in depth than what Herb did, but the idea is the same. And you asked earlier, where do the ideas come from? The ideas come from the news. I'm a voracious newspaper consumer. Sometimes I read, most days I read at least 4 and sometimes 5 newspapers a day. And
Online or print?
both. I get the Journal and the Chronicle in my driveway, and I get the Daily Journal, the Post when it comes out, and the San Francisco Examiner out of the boxes.
Yeah.
But a lot of times people will say, "Hey, why don't you write something about this? This is really bugging me." And we get email. You can on the right-hand side is a link for editor@burlingamevoice.com. You can
Yep.
send an email in. I've had, or it shows up in the comments. I had a regular commenter put up a concern that his parents were suffering from elder abuse, and so he asked if we'd do a post about that and see
Yeah.
how common it was, and we did that.
Yeah. And still no advertising, right? There's still no advertising. That's great. Okay.
We don't want the bookwork.
You know what? That's one of the reasons we don't have advertising. It's a lot of work. As soon as you start putting advertising in, who's going to design the ads? Who's going to sell the
Who's
ads?
gonna
Who's
sell,
going to
right.
do the bookkeeping? So.
Oh, I'm looking
it's
at it the
still-
other way. As soon as we start doing that, it becomes a going concern, and we need a
Right.
business license and an
Absolutely.
accountant. We don't want any
Yeah,
of that.
absolutely.
Okay.
Been there,
so
done that.
Over the years, what's been your most controversial article? What's the thing that got a lot of pushback on? Anything in particular? Besides the grocery store fiasco that you must have got pushback from me?
I can remember a couple of them. We did a big story on the Glenboro development on the Bayfront, which is now the Meta development. In fact, I think I have one here, if I can get it quickly. Yeah, here it is. You can see a photo of the development there, and that was quite controversial in its time because it was going to change the face of the Bayfront. Again, those unintended consequences of, well, where's the nearest police station? Where's the nearest fire station? How is this gigantic development going to be serviced from an infrastructure point of view? So that was a pretty big issue, and we got a lot of pushback, of course, from the developer and the city council. It's funny to look at now because Burlingame's forgotten Bayfront mega complex raises shoreline issues, and we have a mega complex out there today.
Right.
So 20 years later,
And we apparently have shoreline issues.
right, exactly. And I might say that even though I wasn't enamored with the design of this original project, I actually like it better than what's out there now.
I would say the land use issue, as a category, that's the one that, because we have this group of YIMBYs, so-called YIMBYs in the Bay Area, who are trying to push further development in any place that it can be shoehorned in.
What's a YIMBY? I'm
It
sorry.
stands for Yes in My Backyard.
Okay.
It's mostly people who don't actually have a backyard,
Yeah.
trying to be envious of those who do. And so we get pushback from that.
Right. Okay. So, going on that theme right now, have you ever had an issue, an apology, or do a retraction on anything you guys ever put out there? Do you remember anything like that?
I don't remember anything specific, but I have had people come up to me in the last year or so and say they don't like the Burlingame Voice, they don't like its tone. But when I review the Voice, I don't see that. I don't, if people disagree with your perspective, they're going to attack the character of what's happening, I think. They won't come out and say, I didn't like your perspective. They'll say, oh, I don't like the tone. And some of the tone comes from the comments. It doesn't come from the original post. And look, it's the internet. It's an anonymous, sometimes de-evolution is what I call it. Any social media platform that happens where, and we've had many discussions about how do we keep the discussion at a higher level, right? That's very difficult to do because it just naturally devolves sometimes. To go back to your original question, one of your original questions, one of the things that I'm quite proud of is if I look at the things we covered in the very early days, we actually influence decision making. from land use, particularly. One of my favorites was, and this was I think it was issue number 1. No, it was volume 1, number 2. I'll show this again, Ray. There was a small article that we did about a giant storage unit proposal on Howard Avenue.
Oh my gosh.
It is still a car lot today where they store one of Putnam's.
One right next to the train tracks where you have the double-level steel storage.
So this was a 3-story prison-like storage unit that was going to take up the whole lot. It didn't even have any windows. The windows that they showed in the proposal were painted on. It was just a cinder block building.
Boy.
And we thought, this is going to decimate the east side of the
Absolutely.
of Burlingame.
Yep.
And so we were pretty adamant about trying to stop that project. And I like to think that we did, that we at least influenced the final decision. So I'm pretty proud of the fact that, we're just not venting. We are informing and empowering the citizens of Burlingame, truly.
Okay, so Joe, does the Voice endorse local or national candidates or propositions?
To the extent the Voice is Russ and I, if we ever did that, we would discuss it first. In my post, I have endorsed candidates over other candidates, for sure.
Locally or nationally or both?
Not nationally.
Just locally?
Just locally.
Okay.
And I would not shy away from wading into county endorsements. I haven't really done it, but I wouldn't be afraid of doing it.
Okay.
So and locally, one of the benefits, we don't have ink by the barrel, but we have ink by the gallon maybe. And so before I would ever do that, I would sit down for an extensive interview, which I did in the last city council. I've done that for probably the last 4 or 5 city council elections. Even for candidates that I know pretty well and have already interviewed.
Yeah.
I'll double back and do it again.
And we don't always agree.
Oh,
Yeah,
I bet.
yeah.
You can't.
Can't imagine we've disagreed on city council candidates too much, but
Well, not too much, but maybe a little.
maybe.
Well, okay, so let's go to that for a moment. Joe, you were married to, or still married, but she's no longer council person or mayor, but she was in the council person for many years, 12, I guess. And Russell, you were a council person for a few years yourself.
Yep.
Did you guys ever use any of that kind of information to base any articles on one way or the other? Or do you follow my drift?
I'm not following your drift, I don't think, but I will say this. Sometimes being on the council, you know of something or you know of a fact that maybe no one else would know. It's not like you're using insider information. It's not like you're divulging something that cannot be divulged. You certainly wouldn't divulge something that would be being discussed in a closed-door session, for example.
Yeah.
But if it was public record, you can certainly discuss that.
Joe, Joe, you feel the same?
I do. Almost anything we need to form the factual basis of an article is available if you know where to look.
Yeah.
Or is available simply by asking directly. The crime statistics, every January, I email the chief of police and I say, when you're done collating these statistics, which he does for the council, would you also send me a copy? And I update the post from the prior January with the new numbers and show that the trend lines are for thefts and burglaries and everything else. If I didn't ask him for it directly, I'm sure I could go find it, but it'd probably take me an hour.
Yeah.
Right?
I think, Mark, having relationships with people is important. If you're on the council, you get to know city staff really well, and so you know who to ask if it's a particular question. You're not spinning your wheels like maybe an ordinary reporter might be. He's dialing for dollars. He's trying to find the information. A lot of times we know exactly who holds that information, and we can call them directly. Now, staff has changed over the years, and it's not as easy anymore.
And I want to give a shout out to city staff. I send occasional emails to Lisa Goldman, the city manager, chief of police, Syed in Public Works, and they're very responsive. So I I have no issues with that. The city attorney's office is highly responsive.
Yeah.
I've only filed one Public Records Act request, and it was quite a bit of work, and they were as responsive as I could have asked
Yeah.
for.
Great.
Yep.
Okay, got time for a couple more?
Absolutely.
All right. So recently, well, I guess midterm elections, we had redistricting that went on.
We did.
What do you guys think about that?
Hate it.
Uh-huh.
I like it.
Why? Seriously?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, why?
I think it's in some ways levels the playing field and encourages people to run for council. If you have to run citywide, that is a daunting task. And Joe knows this as much as I do, of walking neighborhoods 2, 3, 4 times up in the hills, up and down stairs, getting lawn signs, the whole campaigning for it's not the job that's hard, it's the campaigning for the job that's hard. So if you reduce it to a district, it makes it easier to do. It's less of a geographical area to cover. Secondly, you're concentrating on representing a particular area of town. For many, many years, the east side of town was not represented at all. And so,
Except by you.
except by me
And
for
Don
a
Lumby.
blink
Right.
of an eye.
Right.
For a blink of an eye. And so you had the majority of the council that lived on the west side, and all the land use issues affected the east side. You don't see big development on the west side.
Not at
You
all.
simply don't.
Yeah.
So if you don't live on the east side, I'm using this as an example of why district elections could be beneficial, is you now know the issues of your particular district. There are some districts that don't have that many issues, quite frankly, but the east side is one that I can talk from experience that has most of the land use issues, land on the east side.
So I'll give you the counterpoint.
Yeah, I was going to say, go ahead, Joe, bring it.
Since the founding of the city, every voter has had a say in every seat on the city council. Everybody had 5 votes, 3 one cycle, 2 the next, 3, 2, 3, 2. And so now I have 1 vote every other cycle, and I feel like I've had 80% of my voice taken away. One out of 5 is 20%, so I've lost 80% of my voting power. I don't have a say in the other 4 districts. They don't come to me. They don't ask me what I think. Or actually, we don't know that yet because right now we have a council that was elected under the old auspices and has that ethos of wanting to represent everybody. I can really see this breaking down, particularly with all the development that's going up around the BART station and whatnot. Eventually that becomes its own district. I have the same worry about Russ, but in a different direction, that, you know, we're going to have a council member or 2 who couldn't care less what happens on the west side, right? In fact, they might even think we deserve to look more like the east side.
Russ, how do you feel about that?
I like to give a little bit more credit to those who run for council, and that they understand that while they represent their district, they also represent the city as a whole.
Okay.
I got to give people a little more credit than that.
And
Now,
I'll
to Joe's point, again, will it devolve? Time will tell.
I'll offer an olive branch to Russ's perspective in that I think even if you got elected in a district and you had that mindset, by the time you've been exposed to all of the citywide issues and forced to vote on them on camera and online in a public council meeting, you're going to find it hard to be so provincial in your own district.
Okay.
Right. I wouldn't disagree with that.
And, you know, if we do run into that situation, I'll be happy to make sizable campaign contributions to somebody to run against them.
At the end of the day, what are you hoping that the Voice has accomplished?
You know, again, if I look back, I think we've already accomplished some goodness out there. I mean, if I look at the things that we covered, both on the blog and in print, I think we've done some good. I always liken the Burlingame Voice to the town crier, is that we're yelling at the top of our lungs, pay attention to this, pay attention to that. Our goal is not to get something done necessarily. Our goal is just to raise awareness of the issues, and I think we're doing a pretty good job at that.
And I would even build on that and say we're doing it with a critical eye of experience. When you asked me to do this, for the first time ever, I sat down and thought about what are the principles that drive the voice. And I've told you a couple of them already. I'll just give you a couple more that I think we're delivering on. There's no free lunch. Somebody's paying for stuff. So you should always be doing cost-benefit analyses. When somebody takes a position or casts a vote, I want them to be asking, does it pass the shoe on the other foot test? And we'd like to see, one of my wife's favorite sayings when on the council was, people get interested when the pothole's in front of their house. I think our basic effort is to try and get them interested in the potholes in front of the rest of the community's houses.
You good with that?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Last question for both of you. If you could change one thing about Burlingame, what would that be?
I would like to see the council have a bit more spine in protecting its local control. I think they look at big bad Redwood City and big bad Sacramento and cower in front of it a little bit. Maybe that's not the right verb, but we're talking about the voice here, so we use a pointed verb. I recently did a piece that sort of piggybacks on the Daily Post from Palo Alto editorial that said, look, there are cities who are filing suit and are fighting these laws in court, and I'd really like to see us join in. I think we've got some resources, we've got expertise, and frankly, we've got a whole bunch of cities up and down the peninsula whose majorities agree with us. It goes back a little bit to the fight against high-speed rail, which, by the way, is ongoing and is a long-running topic on The Voice. People would be amazed at how much money is being poured into a tiny little section of not even track. They haven't even laid track yet in the Central Valley. But back when this was a hotter button issue, there was a group called the Peninsula
Coalition.
Consortium, Peninsula PCC, whatever the PCC stood for, it escapes me. And it was elected representatives up and down the peninsula who would meet and who would figure out ways to try and counter this on the peninsula.
Yeah.
And I think we need more of that. We need, the official groups like Association of Bay Area Governments aren't doing the job for cities like Burlingame.
Russell?
Yeah, I mean, I could piggyback on that by coming back to what we said earlier about land use. That is the hot button in most towns, most small towns. I said in The Voice about 10 years ago, I said, you won't recognize Burlingame in 10 years because there's so many large projects in the pipeline, either approved or about to be approved, that when they get built, people are going to be shocked. And I think that's what's happening today. If you look at what's happening downtown, right in the heart of downtown, you look at the removal of the trees, you look at the bayfront, you look everywhere in Burlingame, and the buildings are getting bigger, taller, denser. You're adding more traffic. You're taking away parking. Maybe I'm oversimplifying this, but I said it 10 years ago. Kathy Baylock ran on a platform that said, Burlingame, you'll miss it when it's gone. Well, it's going. It is changing very rapidly, but the revolt will be too late, right? The shock will be, oh, look at that gigantic building. How did that happen? I don't like it. Well, then it's too late. It's already built. The time to get involved is when it's at the Planning Commission or it's at the City Council, and that's what the Burlingame Voices has always tried to do. We used to put in a calendar of events. Get involved. Here's when the meetings are. Here's where those meetings are. So I think that's the good that we've always tried to do, is raise the awareness, give people the tools to get involved. Whether they choose to get involved or not, that's not our call.
And by virtue of this podcast, you are helping the cause, Mark. So Russ and I really want to thank you.
Right.
It's going to be great. We're going to link to it on The Voice, so people will be able to click here and get through to your YouTube channel and see all this. This is really the first time we've been on audio as a team and recorded such that people can hear what we're all about.
Yeah, we've done a couple of backyard sort of soirees where people were interested in the Burlingame Voice and what we covered and how we covered it. But those are kind of off the record. Once that event is over, it's gone forever.
Right.
So
this is a great 20th anniversary present.
Right, absolutely.
Thank you.
Good.
Absolutely.
Well, Joe Baylock, Russ Cohen, thank you both, and my videographer, Ray Tyler. Thank you guys for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Our pleasure.
I'd like to thank Joe Baylock and Russ Cohen, the voices behind the Burlingame Voice, for being my guest today on Burlingame. It's a Small Town podcast sponsored by the Burlingame Historical Society. Thanks to Kathy and Shelby for editing and producing, the great Ray Tyler for video, and my musical director, Bray. You can hear more of Bray at bray.com. The Burlingame Historical Society copyrights this recording, and no part can be copied or replayed without the permission of the Burlingame Historical Society. Until next time, everyone, see you around Burlingame. It's a small town.